property fondly known as the Barrack site. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. Before we get into this topic, it's a distinct pleasure for me, and I wanted to introduce you to a new staff member because it's planning related, issue, and you were kind enough to give us a position in the budget last year for sustainability overview, and the position was sustainability manager. And while we haven't been able to hire someone full-time, but I'm very happy to introduce to you Anu Natarajan, if Anu could stand up. She's just joined City Manager's office as a consultant to oversee the sustainability effort, which is a big thing in the city of Santa Clara. We may be slightly behind compared to other cities, but she's going to bring us up to speed real quick. So, welcome.
Thank you, welcome. And I think some of us just saw you getting an award. Was it at Senator Rakoski?
That's correct.
One of the awards, and I was at the presentation, so it's nice to meet you here, and welcome to Santa Clara.
And she has a degree in architecture, and she's a planner, and she's currently working as a consultant in planning area.
So she can also work in our community development department,
She
too.
can do a lot of things.
Yes, okay, good, great, multi-talented.
That's
Thank you,
true.
and welcome.
All right.
Anu.
So now to the thing at hand. First of all, we forgot to put the address in the memo, and it's, like you mentioned, is commonly known as Barrack Site, and the address is 90 Winchester Boulevard. Everyone knows the sustainable project. So just in the way of background for the members of the public, through mayor and council's leadership, we have retained project for public spaces to look at open space in Santa Clara as well as some specific projects, and that exercise is ongoing. In fact, I also wanted to commend Andrew Crabtree, our Director of Community Development, and his team, and other members of city staff who volunteered last Saturday in the exercise for Power of 10 that was led by PPS also, so a job well done. So with that, today we have PPS here to talk about this particular project. They've gone through a community workshop, and they'll share with us what the results have been and where we should go. And core development people are here too, their staff, and if you have any specific questions of them afterwards, they'll be available to answer. So with that, Andrew, would you like to introduce the speaker first?
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Andrew Crabtree, Director of Community Development, and with those two introductions, you've covered most of what I had to say. But I would like to go ahead and introduce Philip Wynn, who is here with us from the Project for Public Spaces, and he will be presenting both the summary of the workshop that was held in that community in March, as well as the PPS recommendations for the project site going forward. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Philip.
Thank you. Good evening, Philip.
Evening. So again, I'm Philip Wynn with Project for Public Spaces, and great to meet all the council members, city manager, and everybody else that's present, and everybody who came out from the community to continue to participate in creating this shared vision. So I have a bunch of stuff to share, so I'm just gonna dive into it if the council is ready. As Andrew said, really the frame around what I'm gonna be talking about tonight is the community workshop that we helped to facilitate in March. But before I get to the findings from that, I just wanna give a brief overview of the approach that we are using in this project and the approach that we use really when we work anywhere all around the world. A lot of it is based on this diagram about what makes a great place. The organization is called Project for Public Spaces, and our expertise is really looking at what makes a public space the most welcoming, accessible, high-functioning, active, productive place for a community possible, and how do you get all the members of the community involved in supporting that place and making it a great place. And when we look at places all around the world that are working really well, we see that they're working very well in all four areas of this quadrant. So it's uses and activities, comfort and image, access and linkages, and sociability. So that means uses and activities is, are there many different things for many different kinds of people to do in a place? A great public space is never single use, and it can't attract or hold or build community if it only serves one purpose for a small group of people. Comfort and image is really about, do a majority of people feel welcomed into this place? Do they feel comfortable there? Do they feel proud of what it is? Do they feel like it's a great place? Access and linkages, great public spaces need many different ways to get there, and it needs to be connected to other places through all the different modes of transport that we have. So being, walking, cycling, public transit, and private vehicles. And sociability is really the magic of this. So great public space is a place where people really can make genuine human connections with one another. It's a place where people want to spend time with friends, family, people that they know, but also where they'll be more willing to connect with and spend time with people that they don't know. And really, the process that we led in this community workshop and the lens that we use to look at all of these issues is based in that diagram. In laying out the work here around the 90 North Winchester site, I don't think I'm going to read through all of these goals in their entirety, but they're in your packet. We tried to lay out some clear goals of what we're doing. So the idea is for us to help facilitate a clear and inspired vision of what's possible for the public spaces primarily on this site. To integrate that with citywide goals about sustainability, density, alternative transportation, and really making this whole Winchester Boulevard corridor something that can support those goals. And then to work directly both with the developer and the community on trying to elevate and enrich the vision for what's possible on the site, and in conjunction with that, the last bullet item to help to facilitate, again, this collaborative multi-sector process here around ending up with the best possible outcome for everybody on the site. So with that in mind, the workshop was a very lively workshop in March. It was held at your wonderful senior center facility, and we got, I think, a really great, diverse, and broad array of community members there. We had great support from city staff, which I want to thank Andrew Crabtree and all of his staff and other people from the city who helped make that workshop so successful, and also all the community members who came out and gave their great ideas and their expertise. Our approach to trying to come up with the best vision in these circumstances is to always lead with the idea that the community is the expert. And it's not about one individual's ideas, but it's about getting as much input as possible from everybody who has a stake in the project and trying to synthesize that into a vision that can work for the most people. And when we took all of the great input that we got from that workshop process, there were some clear things that came out of it as themes. One of them was that we heard a lot about sociability. So the public space needs to be inviting to everyone. That it can't just work for the residents of the proposed development. It has to work for neighbors. It has to work for people who are coming to the other destinations that are in that part of Santa Clara. Ideally, it needs to work for everyone in the entire city and be a benefit to them. That this idea of the agrohood needs to be expressed through a wider variety of styles of food production and needs to be more firmly integrated with public space uses throughout the site. And that this space really needs to be a multi-use destination. Going back to that diagram, it needs to have layers of activity that are in it. And we heard an incredible range of ideas from the community members that were in the workshop about all the different kinds of uses that they would love to see on this site that are public uses. And the vision that we'll share later in the meeting is a first pass at trying to show a set of spaces that we could think could more strongly support that wider variety of uses. And we also heard a lot about pedestrian connectivity and some of the challenges for that in and around Winchester Boulevard and some ideas about how it could be alleviated and improved. So with all that in mind, our team then took that community input together with our organizational expertise and tried to develop a simple and clear set of principles for the development. And I'll just walk through them briefly here. The first one is to maximize public ground floor uses. So one of the things that we've found in looking at public spaces around the world is that if they don't have strong edges that are connected to them, they'll fail. And so it's very, very difficult to have an active high-functioning public space that doesn't have also public functions around at least some of the edges of it. And so this can be done in a variety of ways. It's often the first and obvious thing is retail, and we think retail should certainly be a component, but it certainly doesn't have to be the only component. And we think that there are a variety of public uses that could be housed and facilitated in the ground floors of the buildings on the development that need to have a really strong linkage to what's happening in the public spaces. The second principle is to say, let's evolve and expand and elevate this idea of agrihood. And let's not forget about the hood part of agrihood, to say that we want this place to be a great community benefit and serve a whole lot of different neighborhood functions for the residents that are on site, for the people that live nearby, and for Santa Clara as a whole. And we believe that one of the ways that that needs to be explored is to think about all the different ways that agriculture and food production can be supported on the site. The next one is to say create strong attractions. This is something that's universal in great public spaces around the world, again, is that they have hubs of activity. They have things that are strongly visual, that attract people, that support the identity of the place, that help people wayfind, and that create the kind of energy and dynamic of the space for people to move through it. We need to maximize visibility and access. We need to make sure that people who are passing by the site or who are interacting with it for the first time really get that there are many public uses on the site, that it's not just residential development, but that it's something that's going to serve a lot of functions for the community. And the other main principle that we used and that we built our workshop on Saturday around is this concept that we call the power of 10. And this idea is that, that really the great cities of the world are a series of great public destinations. Those destinations actually have a number of unique places within them. And then each of those places, which is something like the scale of this bookstore that we're showing in this image, have at least 10 things to do. And those things don't need to be blockbuster productions, but they just need to have the variety of things that you see, simple everyday activities that are all happening in close proximity to one another to make a really great place where people want to be, where they want to return to, where they want to spend time. The last principle I believe here is to consider interim uses and these letters LQC, which stand for lighter, quicker, cheaper. One of our ideas that we've found a lot of success in the last decade or so is to look for opportunities to actually pilot and model what can happen in a development prior to making the big investments and big capital improvements. And we know that the timeline on this development is very long. It's been going for quite a while already, but we do think that there could be some really exciting and interesting ways to take parts of this site right now and test out some of these ideas and start to see how they can work at their highest level when the full capital improvement comes online. I'm going to move very quickly through these, and they were in the original packet that we gave to the council and in the one for tonight too, but we just wanted to pull out a couple of quick example case studies that we thought were pertinent. We are definitely not saying replicate any of these things on the site to the city or to the developer, but we just wanted to point out some of the things that we think work well. The first is a development called the Mariposa District in Denver, Colorado. This integrates mixed and market rate housing development with a bunch of different agricultural and public space uses. So you'll see, similar to some of the things in the original proposal here, you have raised beds, you have shared spaces, you have played spaces that are very well integrated with the residential development. And you also have very visual, creative, and welcoming integration between the ground floor of the development and the surrounding streetscape to create a place that that we think will draw people in, that has a sense of creating life in public spaces on the sidewalk, on the street, that we hope that this development will have. And you can see the way that the ground floor is built out in this building is clearly a public use. It has its own entrances and exits, it's glass, and it's something that's not just for the private use of the development, but that benefits the street. The next example is a place in Montreal, Canada. It's called Jardin Gamelin, And this is really primarily to say, what are all the ways that we can integrate a whole lot of different uses with the agricultural uses in the site? How do we make a really dynamic, fun, 18-hour-a-day destination where people can spend time together, where they can be around this wonderful plant life and be learning about what's happening there? We have a lot more images of this site, but there are classes that happen here around gardening and agriculture and sustainable food production. And it's really creating a destination where a lot of that activity can happen, be supported, and be highly accessible to many people in the community. The last one is in Brooklyn, New York, a project called North Brooklyn Farms. And this is one, again, where we see a relatively small area being used for food production, but a hugely dynamic range of things happening around that in terms of learning, in terms of community events, in terms of farm-to-table events, and ways to really, get this knowledge and community building around agriculture and food happening in a way that is accessible to the largest amount of people, because it's not the only thing that's going on in the site. So there, I've been in this site many times when this, for example, BMX activity is happening next to people who are taking a class about how to better cultivate their own home gardens, and it creates this wonderful mix of different groups coming together that's really dynamic. The last case study, Pearl Brewery in San Antonio, Texas, is a whole mixed-use development that's really been built around the idea of food and local entrepreneurs and restaurateurs, where they've invested heavily in creating these flexible, active, attractive public spaces. They have a hugely successful farmers market. They do a variety of festivals around food and culture there, and they've really, in a place that is relatively far from downtown San Antonio, have created an incredible new community destination that has added a lot to the identity of that city, and that I think has a lot of great benchmarks to look at in terms of the way that the buildings and the public spaces are integrated. So next, we wanted to just list off for you what we saw as some of the clear elements that could be an important part of the public spaces of this development site moving forward. And we've also divided these again into kind of classifications of what they might be, with just some rough benchmark examples to give you a visual idea of what it is. So the first one, again, is active edges, to make sure that as this vision is developed, the public spaces have really great active edges that serve them well, that connect between the ground floors of the building and even potentially some of the smaller community or retail-oriented buildings that could be on the site and the public spaces that are next to them, as well as to the street. And so just some examples of developments around the country where we think that that's been done well. And there's a wide variety of what the aesthetic of this can feel like, but it's really about strong spatial, operational, physical connections between buildings and the spaces that are next to them. Community uses, this is not the greatest image in the world, but what it is something that's called Library Express, which is a facility in Discovery Green in Houston, Texas, where they have a very small footprint library that's inside of that public space and that serves a huge audience despite the fact that it's a very small space. It spills out into the surrounding spaces often. The librarians here help to program community programming like story time and other things in the park that create a great connection. We've seen good examples of other community organizations like Boys and Girls Clubs at this location in Washington, D.C., being again able to have a direct connection to what's happening around the spaces. And we think that in addition to retail, agricultural, food and beverage uses on the site, these public-facing community uses are something that should be seriously considered. We've seen, other developments in the Bay Area that we think do a nice job of opening up the ground floor of the building to its surrounding spaces. So that's an example of that. A couple of quick examples in terms of the agricultural space. Just to say that, we think the key here is really visibility, involving community members, and figuring out the best way to organize the space to allow for that, and to make a place that's welcoming, not just for people who are deeply engaged in the activity of the agriculture on the site, but but for visitors, residents, community members, whoever it might be, to make that place have the biggest community benefit as possible. We know that there are places on the site where the idea of an orchard could be a very productive way to involve agriculture in addition to row farming. And so just looking at the ways that that can be done. We heard a lot from community members in the workshop about the desire for comfortable, inviting, active places to sit. And so we call this concept the community patio. Just to make sure that it's very, very clear that these are public spaces, that they're not just for the residents of the development, but they're really for everybody in Santa Clara, and that this could be really a town square for this part of Santa Clara for people to come together, learn from one another, spend time with each other, and enjoy things that are related to the site. We certainly think that there could be vendors on the site who are very actively engaged with what's going on and with the food that's being produced there, and also with the spirit of what's happening on the site and the history of the site. So just sharing some examples of what that could potentially look like. We've seen some really wonderful examples, particularly this one in Dufferin Grove Park in Toronto, Canada, of the way that actually having a not only food production, but cooking happening in public, in a public space, can be a really wonderful way to bring community members together. And this bread and pizza oven in that park has become kind of iconic for the way that people use the space and relate with one another, and has started a whole movement of these happening throughout Canada. And just, again, more ideas, this from Allied Arts nearby, about what the feeling of this space could potentially be to really try and elevate that idea of the comfort and image of the site. We heard a lot about wanting opportunities for gathering and performance on the site. We really believe that those should be as multi-use as possible. We like this space, again, in Discovery Green in Market Square in Houston, that can function very well as a stage, but can also house market activities and a variety of things, so that you really have something that 18 hours a day, 7 days a week can serve a bunch of different uses and not be the band shell that's only used once a month and doesn't really support any other activities on the site. We heard, the desire for other cultural uses. So this is, a temporary art exhibit in a square, and for making the things for children and families on the site as creative and as multi-use as possible. So if we're going to have public art, can it be playable? If we're, going to provide other opportunities for play on the site, can we make them as flexible and modular as possible, so that in the evening that same piece of territory can be used for an outdoor film instead of for a playground? And can we have play really be something that appeals to all ages, to allow flexible spaces like these where no matter what age you are, you have an opportunity to play and connect with other community members, something that I think is definitely a trend around the world, and that is hugely activating and successful for a whole variety of public spaces. And this sort of relates again to the play element, but when we talk about the identity of the space, the history of the space, the culture of the space, how do we bring the arts into it in a way that is as memorable, interactive, multifunctional as possible, and bring something really unique to the site? And this is not to say do any of this, but these are, this, for example, is the Distillery District, again, in Toronto, Canada, and they worked with an artist who made this giant interactive piece that speaks to the history of the alcohol production that was formerly on that site. And so we think there could be an opportunity for a new idea on this site that works to it. We got a bunch of comments in the workshop about health and the way that that site, in addition to being about sustainable food production, can also be about all kinds of elements of a healthy and active lifestyle. And so how do we fit that into the site? Many people mentioned pets as well. And so there are a lot of ideas that need to find a place here. And that's why we always talk about the idea of spaces being multi-use, multifunctional, and not thinking of them as being single use, but thinking that you can have a whole layers of activity going into the site. So I think, just to preface looking at the alternative plan here, I want to make clear that our purview in this project and with the city is to really think about how do we make great public spaces on this site. And so what we chose in creating this plan is to use it as another kind of recommendation so that both the council, the developer, community members can see an idea of what could happen on this site that's really focused on those public space uses. Our core competency is not in the real estate development side of this, or the number of units that are going to be in these buildings, their heights. And so what we chose to do in this alternative plan is to keep the basic footprint of what CORE had suggested for the site, but to try and reorganize the site in a way that we felt would support the biggest variety of the uses that we saw in the workshop. And so to just very quickly show you how that shook out, and again, really with the focus on the public spaces on this plan, when we looked at everything integrated together, we felt that it would be a much more successful public space if it could be more visible and along Winchester Boulevard. And if a number of other elements on the site could be reorganized to give it the possibility of having much more active edges on all sides. And so you've seen this on your packet, and I'm happy to answer specific questions about it. I think that might be more useful than marching through every single element of it, and particularly because we see this as a visualization of our recommendations and something that we know that many other stakeholders in this project are going to have to respond to and integrate into what they're talking about. But I hope that the drawings are clear enough to show you the basic concept of reorganizing the public spaces on the site for maximum public use and creating a series of different dynamic destinations that can support those uses. So I think with that, I'm happy to answer any of the council's questions as they relate to them, and I'm happy to flip back to different images along in the presentation if that would be helpful.
Thank you, Philip. Now they're all lighting up. Okay, Vice Mayor Caserta.
Thank you for your presentation, and I appreciate your accessibility in the community and realizing that leadership's listening as well as speaking. I thought you've done that great through this process. A couple of questions. I know since 1998, 99, we've been discussing this as a great site for seniors. Can you talk about that demographic in regards to this when you talk about, vibrancy and reaching out to different stakeholders and in the community, knowing that this is a linchpin we would like to see?
Certainly. I mean, we definitely have had members of that demographic in our workshop, and I think had some great ideas talking about how do we create, the word that I heard more than any was actually intergenerational. So to say, how do we make sure that this is a site that's actually welcoming to everyone? We have a colleague that we work with who says if you can make a space that works great for an 8-year-old and great for an 80-year-old, then that's really a successful place. And I think that's the principle that we've tried to bring in here, is to say, what are the ways that we can have these layers of activity that are very in close proximity to one another, so that our seniors are comfortable and welcome there and there are activities for them, but they're also doing it in close proximity to many other people who are using the site. Because one of the things that we see in successful public spaces that's very, that makes them work is that people are attracted to other people. And so that's the core principle that we've used to try and set this up.
And then two more questions for you, sir, and then one for staff. With Santana Row so close, and they have by Pluto's kind of an active space, some of the images you showed there, do you find having places that create vibrancy in a public square near something like this can impede the success of a vibrant atmosphere there, or does that add to it?
I think that this site and the ideas that we have all the potential in the world to have a unique identity for what it can be. And, in the time that we've spent in Santa Clara and all the conversations we've had, the enthusiasm there is for more spaces for community gathering with a whole range of different atmospheres in them seems very, very high. So I think, I think no is my simple answer. I think that the community has a huge amount of capacity to use these spaces and to express themselves in them and to come together. I don't think it's not a zero-sum game where I think what this is about is actually, hopefully, eventually creating a whole district of Santa Clara that's more connected for people and where they can move from one public destination to the
And
next.
do you think, in your experience working around the country and maybe even worldwide, that the more dense of a development near there, the more successful?
The truth is that it's not that simple, because you want to think that that's the answer, and you can argue that there's some correlation, but we find that there are relatively low density places that have a huge spirit for public life, and they get a huge percentage of people. You think about a small town with a very active main street and a very active public life, and people come out. And alternatively, there are places with pretty high density that have pretty poor public realm. And so that's why our approach is really about, let's look at what the needs are of that public space and what are the things that are going to make it have the highest community benefit, be as active and productive as possible. And we think that really has much more to do with the success of that space than the simple math of how many residential units are close to it.
And then last question, staff. Since PPS has been reaching out to the community, how's the collaboration been with them and CORE?
Generally speaking, my understanding is CORE is amenable to all these suggestions, but they are here, they can answer themselves too. Andrew, do you have an
Do
answer?
you,
Or Paul or Vince?
thank you, sir. Hi, Paul.
I think you've been at all the sessions,
Yeah.
Paul. Yes, you have. I've seen you there.
Yeah, good evening, council. I'm Paul Ring with the Vice President of Development with the CORE company, so happy to reinforce that CORE's been very engaged with PPS and the city in the public-private partnership that we see this project going forward in, and we're very excited with the expertise that they bring for spaces in the public realm.
Okay, thank you. I'll have comments at the end.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember O'Neill?
Thank you. So I'm one of the people that has a fairly long history with this site. And so, the theme that has been involved for, since the state decided to sell the property was the theme of the agricultural history of this property. So I have a couple of questions, and having heard some comments from the public also. So one of the things that strikes me, like there's all kinds of things going on here. In your experience for the, one of the questions I'm gonna, maybe, Andrew might be able to help me, like what are the actual square footage or, percentage of an acre that some of this is? Is it for the rather limited amount of space that we ended up for open space, which is what, like an acre? Andrew, is that what we were?
Acre and a half.
Acre and a half?
To two.
One and
1.5 acres.
1.5, okay. So considering that it's 1.5 acres, in your experience, is it, when we look at all the things that are listed there, is it feasible, or are we going to have to like go back and like pare down and see what's most feasible? And also like in terms of the agricultural space, how does the size of that compare to what was in the proposal, I think that CORE had brought forward? And I know there's some concerns, and I don't know if it was taken into consideration, because we, like you said, we're not really here to talk about the heights. As I do like the idea of having it be more visible from the street, but I don't know if it was taken into consideration in a shadowing on where the growing area might be. So it's just any thoughts about how feasible all of these types of uses in a 1.5 acre spot?
Sure. Yeah, and I'll preface it to say again that, we it's not our scope to deliver a final plan for this site. And so we really see this plan as a way to further the conversation about how we end up with a vision that prioritizes public use more than what we've seen to date. So I think there were three parts of the question. For the first one, absolutely this space can handle this diversity of uses in it. I mean, 1.5 acres is similar to the size of a space that we've worked on in downtown Detroit called Campus Martius Park, one of the liveliest, most active, most multi-dimensional public spaces that I'm aware of. And it's, it may seem small, but for public spaces, it's actually a really nice size for something that can have good edges to it, and where people can see each other, they can see the things that are going on. So I'm not concerned about that at all, and we, call back on those benchmarks when we think about these decisions. I'm not going to quote a square footage on the agricultural element. You can see visually that it's smaller. The row farming that we're showing here is smaller than what was in Core's current proposal. But again, we think that this has to be a collaborative effort with everybody involved to think about what are the whole variety of ways that food production and learning about food production can be integrated into this site. And so we don't think that the part that you see as 3 as orchard, garden, farm is the only place in this site where that can potentially happen. And we welcome all the expertise of people who are deeply engaged in this project to think about how that can happen. And I think I would add that into the idea about solar access, because there's a lot more development and work that needs to be done on thinking about what can grow where and how that makes sense in balance with all the other priorities of the site.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Philip. I like the way this is laid out, and I understand the concern about the garden size footprint that we have here. But for 1.5 acres, and I like the placement of where it is because of what's going to be built around it in the near future. I also like the incorporation of the outdoor farm to kitchen, cooking area, teaching. I was just wondering, and you just answered the question to Councilmember O'Neill, was that this is kind of like a placeholder. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be replicated as with Core, right, Paul? I mean, you're working with them, so, okay. And the other thing is, I just like the vision of this. I think that this is going through your whole studies with Fred, and it's amazing how you kind of think the opposite direction. Because it does incorporate a lot of different things for the people in that neighborhood, but I think the placement of this is much better the way it's, because it's out and it's visual. So if you're driving down Winchester, you're going to see people outside in the garden. You're going to see, they're going to be curious as what's going on. So I really like this idea. I know that we're just kind of like this study session, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to get some of this in here, especially 5, 7, and 8. I was looking at the play area, the exercise thing, or whatever. I don't know what that footprint is, but if that could be scaled back for more of the garden world, because I think that was the intent.
Yeah, and again, if you look, thank you very much, and I'm glad that you appreciate what we're bringing to the project, and this. I think the important thing to look at is not just the plan, but all of the recommendations together, including the benchmarks. And it's impossible and would be, I think, maybe confusing in a plan like this to show the level to which we really think a variety of uses can be integrated with one another. So we've probably zoned them a little bit more here than we might later on. And it reminds me, in trying to get through my allotted time, that I actually didn't show the last couple of slides of the packet. So I'll bring them up now to just give everybody a little bit, again, in a conceptual way, the variety and integration of uses that we would hope to see in the development as it moves forward, so that things have a lot of visual connectivity, that there are very active edges that make this site feel comfortable, and that this wide variety of uses that we heard about in the workshop can really be all happening simultaneously, right on top of one another, which is actually what we see in all the great public spaces in the world. And so I'm glad that you triggered my memory that we had actually made these renderings and I didn't get them up on the screen for you yet.
Well, thank you for your presentation.
Yeah,
Excellent.
Thank you.
Councilmember Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Philip. It's really nice presentation. Having attended the workshop in March, and hearing, the different ideas that were put forth, I really like to see how a lot of those suggestions were incorporated into the proposed layout, and comparing it to the previous proposed layout for the project, the original proposed layout. I really like the concept that you've come up with now. I know there was concern about the ingress and egress into the property, and I really like how these roads have been incorporated in, and I think it'll make the flow of traffic a lot better if that's what is decided. It looks like maybe some space has been lost, or maybe there might be some less units, maybe some senior apartments based on the square footage. I don't know.
Again, we tried to roughly keep the footprints that had been in the original proposal, but we understand that the details of that will have to certainly require a bunch more thought.
It's very minimal. I mean,
Yeah.
the numbers are the change is very minimal. But I just want to say that I'm just really happy to see how the ideas were incorporated, and I like this layout that you've come up with.
Thank you so much.
Councilmember Mahan.
Thank you. I just have some questions. I'll save my comments for later. So, two questions, and I know you don't have heights, exactly planned out, but overall, what are generally the heights on the townhomes that are adjacent to the single-family home neighborhoods, and then the different residential components?
So again, I don't want to put them on the spot, but I would have to defer to core because what we chose to do in this exercise was really to just keep their ground floor footprints and then concentrate on how we think we could make the public spaces work as well as possible. So the assumption we were working under was that those buildings would be very similar to what they had proposed, but given the fact that we weren't working in this phase directly with them on that, we just did the simple math of keeping the footprints as they had proposed them.
So maybe they could answer that.
The buildings that we had proposed, the townhomes were 3 stories, and the apartments went from 3 to 5 stories. So if they were similar footprints with similar access, I think that's what PPS had gone with.
Then what is the overall of the total of the open space or public space, or however you want to define it? The overall acres is one and a half?
One
Is
and
that
a
what
half,
we
I
said?
think, 1.5 to
1.5.
2, wasn't it? 1.5 to 2.
We had proposed 1.5.
Okay.
We haven't done any calculations on the current one with PPS.
Okay, thanks.
Was a
And my other
range.
question, don't know who will answer it. With all the public activity and community activity focused on the Winchester edge, we all know Winchester is a highly impacted street, heavy traffic. It's going to get worse. What is done to ensure the safety of children and seniors and others that might be playing and working and doing other things along that edge?
I think that, you'll see that we're suggesting here as a first idea to have a kind of several parallel rows of circulation along that edge, so that if you look at this perspective view, for example, I guess it's a little hard to tell, but there would be what amounts to an extra wide sidewalk with several rows of street trees, and we'd hope that some of those could be fruit-producing trees to tie into the spirit of the site. And, there are a variety of other things that can be done in site planning to make sure that when you're kind of inside of the site, you feel safe and protected. And so, for example, when you look at the kids' play area here, there are a couple of layers of activity and use and screening that happen before you get to that area. But it doesn't have a fence around it. And we do think it's important for it to be accessible, and we think that there's a degree of kind of getting the atmosphere of these sites right will have the biggest effect on making sure that people feel safe, because I don't think that they're going to be in any real danger from automobiles this far away from the street. It's actually more about making sure that they feel comfortable and can relax and play and spend time in the site.
Okay, thank you. I do like the idea, I like the revised site plan. I like the fact that the townhomes wrap around the perimeter of the site on the single-family residential side, because I think that will be much more compatible to have that step down going into the single-family home areas. And I'm looking at your other examples where various other cities have done these kinds of projects. And it seems to me that the public space, open space is actually, I mean, I'm looking at Denver. Denver did a 15-acre development with 1.4 acres of this kind of open space. In the Brooklyn area, it was a little more than a half an acre. And San Antonio, Texas had 1.65 acres with a 0.2 acre, what they call Parquito, which I thought was a really cute name. But, so, I mean, I think this is really a pretty feasible open space. And, you know, you do want to have activities a little bit compressed, because you want that feeling of vibrancy, that people are there. So even when the park's not full of 50 kids, if there's 10 kids there playing, you'll feel that vibrancy, and it will be inviting and warm and welcome.
I mean, the vision that we heard was of something that I would call a community destination. You know, something that's very lively and is full of a lot of different uses. And Santa Clara has a wonderful park system that serves many, many different recreational needs. But I think one of the places where the community is underserved are these kinds of places that really have a high level of activity, community benefit, and opportunity for people to come together and learn and connect.
And then my one final question is, will it be very easy for seniors to walk from the senior housing area to the activities that they'll probably be most interested in?
We're just showing it in plan, and I think it's pretty deep in the background in this rendering, but we envision, we envision this area with this very slow speed street moving through it as something that will feel like a shared space. So if you think about there are a variety of these places in Santana Row where you're moving across a very slow speed, one lane street. It's a curbless environment, and you're moving from a sidewalk over into another set of public spaces. And we think that that it's very possible to create that here, and the jog in the road is something that's a principle from the Netherlands. It's called a Woonerf, and so it's yet another way for the vehicles that are moving through the space to ensure that they know they're in an environment that they have to share with pedestrians, make eye contact, and move at a very slow speed.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, do you have other questions? Okay. Philip, I just had one question, and of course, many of us have here attended this workshop, and we had almost 100 people from the community. So I just want to remind people this is a community vision. It's not something that Project for Public Spaces invented. We actually invented this by our workshop, which was quite exciting and fun, and it was amazing the amount of energy and ideas that people had for this property. It's a very important property, and there's a lot of people that really want to be involved in this. So thank you for putting this together. One of the themes I remember from the workshop was the idea of food, beverage, as being a huge part of the public space area, whether it's ice cream, coffee, pizza, whatever it is. So I know that we're looking at, maybe up to 25,000 square feet of retail. How is it incorporated? Is it incorporated through the farm-to-table restaurant? I wasn't quite sure, and I know this is very much in draft form and conceptual, but can you talk about the potential commercial uses that will help attract the community?
In this drawing, the entire purple zone that we're showing here, we're calling that active ground floor use, and we don't think that has to be all commercial or retail use. We think it really should actually ideally be a mix. So this is everything from the well-devised entrances to these buildings.
So this is a ground floor of the existing residential units. Is that how you're envisioning this?
Can you the purple is?
I mean the purple.
We see that as public use, but it's the ground floor of buildings that contain residential units.
Yes. Okay, but the public use of the residential apartments.
Correct.
Or whatever. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So the footprint in the middle of the plan is the same footprint as what Core proposed as their mixed-use building.
Okay.
And what we're saying is that it's very important for along that purple edge for it to have very public uses that are very connected to the public spaces that are next to them. Some of that could be neighborhood retail, food and beverage. Some of it could actually be the kinds of things that we were showing, like the little library or the space for the Boys and Girls Club, or even I imagine that there are amenities already in course proposal that are community spaces for those residents, and we think that if it's positioned correctly, that those could be an okay ground floor use here as well. So,
Okay.
and then when you see the both especially the L-shaped building at the top of the plan there, that's what we're suggesting could be one or even two small food establishments that have hopefully a very strong link to the agriculture element of what's happening in the space, and that would take up some of that percentage of the 25,000 square feet.
Okay, that makes great sense. All right, I don't see any more lights, so City Manager, if you don't have anything, we can go to the public.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
then make our comments. Thank you so much. That
Thank
was a
you.
great presentation. We're going to start with the cards that I have, and the first would be Kurt Vartan. I'm sorry, more cards? Okay.
So I have a little handout, but first I'd like to thank, my name's Kirk Bartan. First, I'd like to thank the council and the city staff for looking at new and exciting approaches to make the city better. And I'd really like to thank CORE for partnering with PPS on making the Barrack site as great a community asset as it can be for the entire community. And a big shout out to PPS for bringing their experience and engaging everyone in this massively public experience that we're going through for the public events that the city put out. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to continuing these great conversations. So what I've handed out is really something that focuses on the agricultural element, the placemaking spirit that Fred and Philip and Elena talk about. It's a location down in Southern California called the Ecology Center in San Juan Capistrano. And it's a really small scale location. The single page that's double-sided just kind of shows what the space looks at from an overview, and then what it's done with some events. And the other is what it turned into. So the first page is kind of what the house looked like on this kind of dirt lot. And then the next series of pictures, it's a picture of me and my wife and Alice Waters doing an event down there. But it really shows that how it's flourished over time. It's about 8 years old right now. And that's the kind of thing that really could embrace the kind of agricultural elements that have here. It's small scale. It's not, it doesn't take acres and acres to do something like this. And it's really vibrant and engaging. And it hosts hundreds of people. It's all about children and education and adults and learning. And it's talking about shared experiences that we like to talk about, intergenerational events. And it really embraces the spirit of that. So this is a financially sustainable, proven design that the executive director is very excited about and willing to come out to Santa Clara at some point when the time is right to meet with CORE or whoever's going to program this space. So I just want to say, thank you so much for bringing in PPS into this process, and thank you to all of the staff and council for all the ongoing support.
Thank you. And I was at that Ecology Center. It's an amazing place, and it was amazing the number of people attending there just for different areas. It's wonderful. I hope he can come to town to look at our spaces. I'm sorry, Lynn Cheng, and then Lisa Mendoza after that. Good evening.
Hi, I'm a Worthington resident, and thank you to PPS for hearing us, and thank you to the council for listening to us. I guess we've been talking for 2 years, we've been coming, and it sounds like you're listening, which I think is great. But I guess we're all wondering, because we didn't really know, that's the first picture I've seen, I guess it was on the website, but I didn't look at it. Basically, I guess the heights would be the same, but I guess we wanted to know about the density, because I know at one of the last meetings, it was up to 419 plus 165. So I guess I'm kind of wondering what's the next steps going to be? Like, is that plan going to go with core? Is it, I mean, I guess we're looking for direction from you guys, because we want to continue to have input. And so that's what we're really looking at. And the only other thing I want to say is that it is a very busy street. There was another accident about 2 weeks ago. Drunk people tend to come into our neighborhood off the freeway, and the cops are usually called. So the safety would be an issue. And then the parking, I guess, would be an issue too, because there's really no parking around there. There's very limited street parking. So I guess we're looking for some direction. So thank you.
Thank you, and I guess we'll talk about next steps after, and this is more about the public space as opposed to the development, but we'll still be talking about it. Lisa Mendoza and then Belinda Khan.
Okay. Hi, I'm a resident of Midtown Village also, and I share a property line with the parcel. And so I attended many meetings with CORE and with the workshops. I'm comfortable, what I see is a much taller building and not so many buildings. Something taller where it frees up more open space, maybe a few acres, with fountains, trees, tables, benches, places for people to gather. So it's not, although I think the design is better that PPS presented, I think we could still make that even better. I think CORE's plan has too much density. The buildings are, I think, too much, too high. I don't think they flow as well or fit in the neighborhood. I think it impacts the safety of the neighborhood, the traffic congestion in and around our community, which is pretty heavy. And I also think that it affects the quality of life, it blocking sunlight. I mean, I understand we want to keep it open for the gardens, but I also think we need to think about the residents that live there and their, airflow and sunlight and all of that, because that's important to us as well. I've attended multiple meetings with CORE, and I don't think that we got what we wanted. Instead, we wanted less units and we got more. And I think that as residents of Santa Clara, we don't feel like we're being heard. So I would like to ask the city council from what they've seen at the numerous meetings that we've attended and workshops together, does CORE's current plan, meet the criteria for what the residents want? I personally have seen Kirk's plans that he got an independent designer to do, and I think that they're great. I think it's more of what I think would be a good plan for a space we can all be proud of.
Thank you. And I just want to remind everyone, we're not talking about the development right now. We're trying to focus, and there will be plenty of time to talk about the development, and we will make sure we hear all the public input on that. We're here to talk about the open space now, just the front of the public spaces. I know the development is in progress, and it will have its public hearings, and we'll have the city manager explain the process and the community development director after, but we'd really like to hear your comments on the open spaces, but you're free to say whatever you like. So Belinda, if you'd like to come forward, and then Scott Lane.
Good evening, everyone. I too am a resident of Midtown Village, and my property also is right behind the barrack site. I heard what you said. We're not here to discuss this, but unfortunately I am a little bit. I do love the idea of the open spaces. I think they are important. The farming and everything is great for our children. We do have safety issues already on Worthington Circle. Because of Valley Fair Mall around the holidays, it can take me an hour to go a block down that street, down Winchester, just to get to my house. We're talking about adding over 500 more residents in that corner. So that is a very serious issue for us that are behind that block. And again, the safety of our children. We do have people that come and speed around that street. We've had multiple times where we've had drivers come around and hit parked cars at night. And I worry about my child. So I know we're not discussing that right now, but I would like to reiterate what the other residents said, that going forward, we need to maybe have more of our input because we already live there and we have to deal with the repercussions of whatever decisions are made. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Scott Lane and then James Chung.
It'll sit there. Hi, Scott Lane. Thank you very much. I want to thank Paul from CORE. I want to thank people from Public Spaces. I want to thank Fred that talked this last weekend about how it's the people that are the experts. The end users are the experts. Thank you, Kirk and Marguerite and others that have worked on this for 12 years. I have the feeling this is what PPS work with. Yes, it's green, and yes, it's a blank slate. 12 years ago was, or however long ago it was a wonderful vision. I feel, frankly, with respect, that CORE has actually forgotten some of that vision, and I feel PPS, I'm deeply saddened to say this because I've followed them for a couple of decades, has lost the plot completely. They could have put 10 of these items in with the existing acre and a half. This is what happens when the city didn't keep its eye on the ball and lost RDA money. This is what happens when we don't have strong negotiation in the city to get the corner that the veterans are on. When you have too small of a footprint, you start making compromises. Having said it, I do like the step down. I do like wedding cake. There's certain buildings, I will say, that work with the open space. But this is a great plant if it's in certain shade. But you have things, it evokes the garden. This reminds me of what San Jose does with the Willow Glen Trestle. They want to tear down something and then put a little new modern water tower to evoke agriculture. I don't want to evoke agriculture. That thing had been around my entire life. I want agriculture to be a central part of it. I want us to grab it from the street and shove it all the way on the east, toward the west, from the east to the west. Draw people in. But what they're doing is frankly so disappointing. I cannot believe, I've been to half the places that they've used, and I just cannot believe. I mean, I know I'm being dramatic here, but I hope people come in and say, like, this is a flushing down, and it's really a poor use. And frankly, Fred should be disappointed. This is just shocking.
Thank you. James Chung and then Mark Garcia. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm a resident of Midtown Village. And, I've been attending these public hearings and, sitting through these processes for a few years now. And in the, well, there are 4 bidders in the beginning for this piece of property, 6 acres. And among them, CORE has presented the highest density of them all, and CORE won this project for whatever reason. And I do like the open space plans. They look beautiful. However, with the original plan of 165 senior units, it expanded to plus 419 mixed-use residences, plus 25,000 square feet of community use, plus 1.5 acres of agricultural land. Can we sensibly envision all of that packed into a 6 acres piece of land? And also, the other thing is parking. Now, CORE has told me that they have planned on 0.78, if I'm not mistaken, per residence of parking space. And that fulfills the city requirement. Now, there is no problem with street parking anywhere in Santa Clara, except Levi's Park, okay? And also Mayfield Mall. We have 0 street parking.
Thank you, sir. Mark Garcia and then Dong Dong.
Hello.
Good
My
evening.
name is Mar Garcia. I'm a resident of Midtown Village. And regarding the proposal that we have seen today, I personally like it very much. I like the idea of having the townhouses alongside Worthington. I think they give some kind of continuity with what's in Midtown Village. And also, I like the fact that the open spaces are going to be facing Winchester. So it gives a little bit of privacy for the residents of the community. Now, having said that, and I know you didn't want to hear this, but I have to say I have this opportunity, is the problems with the traffic, the problems with the parking. I understand, as based on what I knew from the plan from CORE, is that the parking was going to be in the ground floor of the buildings. If that's going to be the case, I would like to see how, or I would like to know how, with the current situation or location of the buildings, where the entrances to the parking are going to be, because it looks like there's no direct entrance for cars from Winchester. Everything is going to have to be through Worthington. The other thing that I also wanted to mention is something that Mr. Caserta had mentioned about the proximity of Santana Row and all these kinds of events that are going on in the Valencia Plaza, for instance. I don't really think that there's a need to replicate that outside of Santana Row. Also keep in mind that Santana Row has a lot of a lot of room for public parking. In this area, there's no public parking at all. So that's going to be, I think, a big issue if the idea is to attract visitors and attract people from other communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Dong, 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 and then Tiffany Lee, please. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. I like the PPS proposal very much about this open space, the public space use of the spaces. I even feel the 1.5 acre is not big enough for all they described, because I'm from Midtown Village, because we have a very small community park, which is 1 acre. Actually, I felt it's 1 acre is so small, but now we have 1.5 acre. How can we do so many things that which is quite attractive? So maybe we can think about this to get a little bit more space for the agri-hood or other community activities. So this is what I want to say first point. Secondly, maybe I have to bore you again, because I'm from Midtown, so I have same issue with my fellow neighbors, which is the parking and the traffic. Since we are bringing so many community people, seniors, kids, to this public space, the public area for this much activities, it will bring, for sure, will bring car traffic or foot traffics. So I really hope that the city council can think about this part, because lately in our neighborhood there are package thieves or drunk people hitting our neighbors' cars, and also homeless people wandering between houses. And even I saw police came to stop them to wandering. So more people will bring some problems. So I hope the city council can think about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tiffany Lee, and then Amy Zhu. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. I'm a resident of the Midtown Village. So you know, the Midtown Village is right next to the park side, and right now we have 110 unit, 110 houses over there in 10-acre space. But on the Worthington, if you go there during the weekend, you can see all parked with the car outside. I mean from the shopper, from all the neighborhood. So the most concern we have, not only the safety issue for the senior people and the children, that you can see that it's not going to work if we don't have the solution to really consider how people can park there with adding on 400 something unit. So please do consider the traffic flow over there and the safety around the neighborhood. And thank you so much for taking so much time for listening to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy, if you'd like to come forward, and then Naseem Novri, welcome.
Welcome. Hello, everybody.
You can talk, speak in this, Amy. Thank you.
So that's I come from the Mintown village. So that's why a lot of our neighbor talk about this density, safety, and something. Because a couple of years ago, we spent around 1 million to buy this house. They told me us we'll build a senior house, 165. That I showed in the map, just 30% of the that average. Right now, you add 70%. So right now, in the Mintown village, our area is a single house. So right now, people enjoying their life very quiet. And right now, very quiet. If you add so much, like 410 unit and also the retail space, so you will change our neighborhood the lifestyle, because right now we are very relaxed. If you add so many units and retail, a lot of people bring a lot of outside people come here. So our life will change. So that's why our neighbor already considered our sell the house more around away. So another point is right now you can see Valley Fair Mall already has entrance in the Winchester main entrance. So if you add more units, so that traffic very, very busy, like that. And also in the Washington Street, just one entrance. Right now already has 110 houses use that entrance. But if you add 400 something, you add a lot of more, 70% units, 70% area add more units. So that entrance will be busy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amy. Naseem? And then Gloria McLean. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Mayor and City Council. Thank you so much for having this hearing and allowing us residents to come and learn about the potential design changes and applications for this space. I am a county council for the Green Party of Santa Clara County, so of course it's no surprise I'm here to advocate for more green space. And when I first learned about this project, I was so impressed because it was a rare example in the Bay Area of very innovative, sustainable agriculture project. We do have plenty of Santana Roads nowadays, and there's going to be a lot more. And I think considering the proximity of Santana Road to this location, it's really critical to think about the soul of this project and what this land represented to Californians and residents of this area. There's beautiful, rich soil sitting there that, unfortunately, with the direction that the new proposals are taking, is turning more and more into a profit center oriented and a commercial space. Moving all the growing area next to the busy street sets the stage for commercial development, unfortunately, and creating the community space that attracts people to come learn and have educational opportunities doesn't necessarily have to include everything. This is a really cutting edge opportunity, I think, for Santa Clara to be that city that has the sustainable farming and educational center. It's great to look at the pictures of giant plastic, colorful globes that look like fruit and metal sculptures that look like trees. How about putting those on there? How about dedicating the land that's been for 12 years discussed to actually agriculture, sustainable agriculture, and actually having the footprint to create an opportunity for affordable food and learning about growing food. That's what these residents, as well as other people, can come to this destination to do, which Santana Road doesn't offer. All the other commercial activities don't offer. Thank you.
Good points. Thank you. Gloria? And then Karita Hummer. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm no good at microphones. Okay, can you hear me now?
Perfect, perfect.
I didn't listen to the words said by tonight's speaker as much as I looked at the photos. What I saw was a lot of cement, brick, glass, crowds of people. But still not right? Thank
Better.
you.
I guess even better. Okay.
Crowds of people, but what the agri-hood was supposed to be for years now was a place for low-income seniors to live. And I am talking now mainly about the agri-hood, not the whole corridor. All I can say is it looks to me, what I hear you saying is that you plan to grab the agri-hood and push the seniors out to use the space for other purposes. That is very disappointing to me. This has been on the books and in the process of developing the agri-hood for years now. And to see these people from New York coming in and pushing it aside is very disappointing to me. Thank you.
Thank you. We could keep that down. I want to remind everyone that this was a result of a public community workshop session. So it's our public that helped design this. Karita Hummer, and then Alri Middlebrook.
Thank you, Mayor Gilmore and City Council members. I appreciate the opportunity to address you. I, too, am somewhat disappointed about the design for the public space. I came to it as the president and clinical director of Factor, which is an agency that serves refugees and immigrants. And I was so enthralled because we had this concept of community gardening for the elder immigrants who are so poorly integrated into our community. And not only a community garden where they can produce vegetables and have better nutrition and learn about nutrition, be part of a sustainable land use project that was going to truly be part of the solution and do research on that site, which in fact that is historically the site for research, and that it would be a research center, that the elders would participate in, that they would be part of the solution that we need in our country and in the world today in terms of sustainable land use, and to have it be a demonstration place that they could contribute their own lay down roots in a new land that they need to feel a part of, but still be part of a bigger movement in the world that is so necessary towards sustainable land use. We ourselves have an idea for that property to be serving a disadvantaged population with community gardening for produce that would be intergenerational, but that would also provide a space for a serenity garden that would then be open to the rest of the community at various points, would be an eco-spiritual use of the land, which would honor the Ohlone Indians that were there before and the native plants, and would show the spiritual traditions of each of the participants that would be in that serenity meditation garden that also that we need in our society today so greatly. I guess my time is up, but I want to say that I hope it will return to the original plan of having as much space for the agricultural farm, and it can be a research project that the senior elders, immigrants, can actually participate in as part of the solution for our community.
Thank you very much. Alri Middlebrook, and then Sarah Rosenberg. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I really appreciate Project for Public Places coming and engaging the community. I think it's been a wonderful exercise. I got involved in the project with Kurt Vartan, 2.5 years ago. And we did do a number of drawings and different options for the idea of a working farm and community gardens and lots of program activities. And then we took that energy and worked with CORE. We worked as a member of the community and enlisted over 100 different community groups and got a lot of feedback, in particular from urban farmers and the urban farming community here in the county. And then we worked with CORE. And what I'm feeling a little bit is frustration because we really have never been able to make a presentation to the public, to all of you, about what went into the CORE drawings. And we were very focused on many different program elements, and a lot of the program elements that PPP talked about are actually in our plan. And one of our concerns also is we wanted the farm to be seen from the outside. And we really tried in our plan to put more farm elements on the Winchester side. But the problem with that was that the good sun for growing food was on the southern side. And it's kind of a panhandle shape, you know, so you've got this long shape. And so I have a drawing here of another solution that wasn't submitted in the CORE package, but it brings some of the farm element out on the Winchester side. It engages the public and what is going on, but then it wraps around and the working farm is at the south side where we can grow a lot more food. I feel frustrated because I would like to talk to you about what we actually did there and what we were able to achieve and work toward a solution where we have a working farm and we have the opportunity to really reduce CO2 emissions, to bring the community together, to do something really sustainable, and to engage the local universities in research here because we want to hearken back to the site, you know, for agricultural research.
Well, maybe we can set that up and get your information. I know we had seen some preliminary information, but yes, why don't you get that to us?
Yeah,
so we
is
can
there any
see.
way that we could actually make a presentation?
Why don't you work with our staff and our city manager, if you wouldn't mind talking to Alri after the meeting, or at least get your information to our city clerk, maybe is the best way.
Yeah, we would really,
Okay.
I think if we could just get all of our ideas and what we
But
actually.
we were hoping you'd participate in the project for public spaces.
Well, I did. I was in
oh.
Africa working on, we've created a model there. And that's what we wanted to bring here. And we're all in Africa and India, and we want to bring that innovation here.
Okay. Please connect with our staff so that then you can connect with us. Thank you very much. Sarah, and then Soraya. Welcome.
Well, thank you, council members. Speaking of Africa, so I'm also here today to speak about my slight frustration with the way that the proposed layout of the agri-hood has been presented. I was working with California Native Gardens Foundation and Middlebrook Center last year for a while, and looking at the designs for the sustainable agri-hood and how it connects with the history of Silicon Valley's agriculture. And as it is now, most of that has been taken away. Who am I? What is my specialty? I'm actually currently serving across in West Africa as a Peace Corps volunteer and have been for the last 2 years, working specifically in conservation agriculture and agriculture adoption, sustainable agriculture adoption by farmers. And one of the problems that we have there is how to change the behavior of farmers to adopt practices and to see the value of sustainable farming practices. And one thing that it's led me to understand is that this adoption is the same all over the world. We know that sustainable agriculture works. We know that the value is there, yet we still find a difficult way of integrating it into our policies, integrating it into our public spaces. And the way that I combat that in Africa is by looking for change makers, looking for the people who can take the risk and creating those visual proof to other people and say, look, this works. And honestly, Silicon Valley are change makers. You guys are the people who can take the risk and do that and be leaders for the rest of California, for the rest of the nation. And if you hold the agriculture space in the northern side and you put it in a very small compacted area, it'll be nice. It'll be a good little garden, but it won't be a change maker. It won't be a game changer, and it won't provide the benefit that the original vision had for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Surya? Surya, S-U-R-Y-A-A. Anyone here by that name? Okay, we'll put that aside. Janet Molesky, and then Steve White. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I have been attending meetings for the last, I think, 2 years in support of the core development. And I also went to one of the workshops at the end of March. That was the PPP workshop. And I want to say a couple of things. One is, in the time I spent advocating on behalf of the urban agriculture idea and creating a sustainable agricultural model that we've never had, and supporting this city taking the leadership role in supporting that, I saw core development get supported and become the chosen development company over the others as a result of the passion that people felt for what I believe is the same thing I felt, which was to take this land that we have and make it a model for something that we all know we need to do something a lot more sustainable going forward. One of the things that I noticed about the placemaking, which I thought there were some really great ideas, but I think that is geared for a very city model where we're so different here in California. We're not, this downtown city is not, it doesn't have the same big city feel. And what we're trying to make happen is completely different. And I want to just say, if it's possible that we can have some innovation in PPP to see how different we are here, I would really highly encourage having Allery, who made the design, and CORE, and even PPP get together and talk about this and talk with the city, because I think that the spirit is missing.
Thank you very much. Steve White, and then Kendall Sager.
Mayor, City Council, thanks for your
Nice to see
attention
the shirt
this.
again. I like the
Thank
shirt.
you. Well, it's pretty
Yeah.
obvious what I support. Right? And the point I want to make, I've been following this for a while now, trying to help it as much as I can when I can. And what seems to be happening now is we're losing control of it. I like a lot of the ideas that are coming from PPP. I like the idea that CORE is working with them. I like the idea of the community involvement. I was at the March meeting as well. But I have this sense that maybe we're trying to pack too much stuff into too little space. And, you know, the old military term, blivet, you put 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. It just doesn't work. So my hope is that we get back to the original discussions that we had around the agri-hood, the proposals that we worked out at that time, and maybe we can incorporate some of these new, innovative, nice ideas, but let's not lose that original vision. Thank you.
Thank you. Kendall Sager, and then Henry Nguyen. Welcome.
Hi there. My name is Kendall Sager, and I'm a children's nature educator. I live and work in Santa Clara County. I'm a little bit worried about the direction that the public space took. I really love all of the words that were used to describe this space. They're really wonderful, integrating agriculture and housing and the public spaces. But upon looking at a lot of these renderings, it really looks like the garden has become more cute than functional. It's really been reduced to the point where it seems really superficial now. Like, yeah, it's gonna look great from Winchester Boulevard, but it's not gonna be what I think everyone was really imagining in this space, where we were gonna have the community space, the barn with like a multi-purpose area that could actually draw in the community and really engage people. And I think a lot of those gathering spaces have been removed for this. Like, there is some useful garden space and there's some dining space, but it's not an area where we had been talking about a really like a multi-generational interaction could occur, or where classes could even occur. This seems like it's just kind of stuffed on the side of this. And I would really love to see us go back to having agriculture as the focal point and having a really functional area for this. So thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate it. Henry Nguyen and then Christopher Doan.
All right. Okay, thank you to the city council for having this meeting so the public has the opportunity to talk about this. So I'm Henry Nguyen. I'm a 17-year-old. I'm a high school student, probably one of the youngest speakers going to be up here today. And I like to think that I'm speaking for my demographic. When I say I don't need another Santana Row, right? So when I look at the agrihood, I'm imagining something, a community, right, the agricultural roots of the Santa Clara Valley. And what I've seen with the alternative plan is reducing the agriculture space. And that doesn't make sense to me when we should be increasing the space to truly celebrate the heritage. And I'd like to tell you my story, right? And as a high school student, I was looking for volunteer opportunities. And I came across the California Native Garden Foundation as an intern. And there I discovered something called aquaponics that combines aquaculture and hydroponics. Basically, it's where the system, where the fish and other aquatic animals provide nutrients to plants, and it's a sustainable system. And originally, when I walked into this internship, I really didn't know what to expect, right? In the Silicon Valley, I'm always seeing these new startups and all these new technologies coming around. And my school is a charter school. It's promoting a lot of engineering versus the agricultural roots that have so invested in California, in this valley. And coming off of that, our group, like me and a couple friends, we started an agriculture club at our school. And I feel like there's a lot of students, a lot of people my age that would like to see these agriculture roots. I remember as a kid during the summer that I'd go to these orchards, run through picking cherries and peaches and just having a great time. I think that's what we wanted to celebrate, capturing that spirit in the agrihood. So what I'd like to see isn't like another sculpture to celebrate our agriculture roots, but actually more agricultural space in our planning. So where we can explore and research the new agricultural technologies such as aquaponics. So not only are we celebrating the agricultural roots, but we're also exploring new agricultural futures where we're actually feeding people with actual fresh produce and utilizing new technology they're going to explore. And this can be a testament to kind of what that spirit is.
Thank you, and thank you for testifying. We appreciate it. Christopher and then David Dilwatch. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Christopher Doan. Thank you, City Council, for listening to me and taking time out of your day. I'm the aquaponics specialist at California Native Garden Foundation, recent San Jose State graduate. What is aquaponics? Aquaponics is aquaculture combined with hydroponics. Basically, you're taking fish and recycling their poop to feed plants, and then the plants clean out all that poop and return fresh water to the fish. I was originally told that this would be integrated into the new agrihood, so I was really, really excited about this. Aquaponics is it's the way of the future. We take plants and we grow them in a hydroponic system using fish waste, and that allows us to grow more plants in a smaller area because the roots are all grown right next to each other. So the reason my story is I got in aquaponics my senior year of college. This happened during the time we had that big drought in Syria, and every day I was waking up to pictures in my newsfeed of these babies washing up on the shores of Turkey. These kids had to hop on these rafts that were made out of garbage because there was a drought in their country. They didn't have any way to make food. So it was like either you hopped on this raft made of garbage and try to float to some place where people didn't even want you there just for like the hope of survival, just to eat some garbage, just for some fresh water. Aquaponics is basically a self-contained ecosystem that produces its own produce and its own protein. We're here in Silicon Valley. Everything we do here lands itself in the hands of everyone else in the rest of the world. If we can't get aquaponics to get off the ground here, it's not going to spread. We recently, as a country, backed out of the Paris Climate Agreement, slowing down the progress of the world. Like, please don't back out of the agri-hood plan we originally made. We need this for the future. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. David, and then Deborah Kiefel.
Hello, City Council members. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate you coming out here and listening to each of our perspectives. My name is David Dolmatch. I'm 21 years old. I graduated Gunn High School and I went to Foothill Community College soon after. I got a little off track and lost focus. However, this changed. My dad introduced me to Middlebrook Gardens through a friend of the family, Alry Middlebrook. There were giant prehistoric looking plants all over the place. There were koi ponds hooked up into plastic buckets. But after working there and learning about everything, I saw how it was all connected. The crazy looking fish system pumping all the wastewater through bacteria, which break it down into fertilizer for the plants to eat. It all works together as a fully functional, self-contained ecosystem. And those crazy plants that had smaller native plants next to them, the native plants attracted beneficial insects. The plants were working together to benefit each other. Working in the garden has given me direction. I have found a new focus in environmental studies. So I wake up every day that I can, I dig holes, I feed fish, and it makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah, and then Nicole Keith. And then Jesse Powell after that.
Hello, good evening. My name is Deborah Kiefel, and Santa Clara is actually my hometown. And I would say that I think it's a really very awesome idea that you guys are working to create public spaces in Santa Clara, because growing up in Santa Clara, I can tell you it was pretty boring back then. However, I was actually at the PP meeting on Saturday, and there were two things that really came out of that meeting that I at least observed. One was that the people in Santa Clara really want more nature spaces. If you look at Santa Clara, if you look at a map at Santa Clara, there's like maybe 3 big sections of Santa Clara that have nature spaces. 2 of them are cemeteries, and one's the convent thing over on Benton. So one of the things I'd like to do is I'd like to remind Santa Clara as well as some of its rich history. And so just a little bit of a history lesson real quick here. Santa Clara was established back on July 5th in 1852. During the mid-1800s is when the first orchards were planted. Back in 1984, hope I'm not boring you over there. Back in 1984, work started on the Winchester Mystery House, which is just down the street from the proposed agri-hood. 1976, America's bicentennial, Apple Computer was created. Why am I giving you guys this history lesson? I want to remind you of the innovation of this valley. I want to remind you that Santa Clara is the center of innovation, and I really want you guys to keep that in mind. One of the things I'd like to be able to add to my list here is 2017. The city of Santa Clara built the agri-hood with a real 1.5 acre farm and has committed to leading the world in innovative urban farming practices. As you know, farming, well, I'm running out of time here. Anyway, I just want to please remind you here, please honor and use our rich history and heritage by leading the way in building the agri-hood with a real farm that's at least 1.5 acres. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nicole, Keith, and then Jesse Powell. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. I'm Nicole, and I think it's pretty exciting what we're talking about. I grew up in San Jose and Almaden, which itself is a pretty vast, open, rural feeling area. And yet I spent so many afternoons, so many evenings, so many weekends at Valley Fair, at Oak Ridge, at Santana Row. And I'm glad that I was able to be privileged enough to have those experiences, to go and spend my mom's money on movies and food that wasn't very good for me. And yet I don't feel that I took much away from those experiences in terms of knowledge, in terms of soulful fulfillment. Anything, I didn't take much away that sustained me in any real way. I don't remember much of it. And I'm 25 years old now. I'm not an adolescent anymore, but I'm still trying to learn. I just took a class at Cabrillo College on how to grow plants. I just had no idea. I still am pretty unclear on a lot of it, but I think that when I was a teenager, if down the street from Valley Fair there had been somewhere like the Agri-Hood that had more than an acre and a half of space that was being used to educate and to feed, that would have been so inspiring and could have such a lasting impact for so many people. And like so many people have said here tonight, Silicon Valley is not just anywhere, not to like toot our own horns or anything, but we have so much opportunity to influence, to set an example, and to inspire. And I would like to see the Agri-Hood become all that it can be. So
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And then, is it Jesse? Last card. I love, everyone likes to sit in the back, right? Nobody in the front's talking. Okay, welcome.
Hi, my name is Jessie Powell. I am an environmental engineering student at Santa Clara University, and I am also an intern at the California Native Garden Foundation. For the past, all of my life, I've grown up on a 200-acre farm outside of Portland, Oregon. So I've been around traditional agriculture all my life, and I can tell you that big ag is not sustainable. It will not lead to a sustainable future for future generations. And what the Agri-Hood was designed for originally is sustainable farming methods that can lead to a better future for future communities here and across the globe. And as it is proposed now, in a smaller scale, is just another commercial veggie garden. And so I think we need to reevaluate the size and what it was meant for, which was a research institute for people to refine and develop this sustainable farming methods. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Please come forward because we're going to be closing this off in just a few minutes. We have to have a small break before we start our council meeting at 7. So please come forward if you have any closing comments. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to engage in communion with you all. I think we're absolutely obligated to make the most of this opportunity, given where we are. The Silicon Valley is in such a spotlight in the world, and I would love to see the Agri-Hood do something out of the box and not just another kind of dog parky sculpture thingy, cool place, but something that really addresses the problems that we are facing as a humanity. We are addicted to this drug called fossil fuels. We eat this poisoned food, and our children eat poisoned food. I mean, Monsanto and we all know it. And the only way to get out of it is to have it right in our face. What is the solution? The power plants are hidden away. The food is hidden away. I live in Morgan Hill next to the grass farm, and it's scary, dude. The topsoil is blowing away. I just would love to ask you all to find it in your hearts to make the priority education, the future, sustainability, and not townhouses, not money, not looks, but real proactive change and revolution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
My name's Travis.
All right, Travis, thank you. Anyone please line up, because again, we need to, unfortunately, end this.
Good evening. I think there's a few things that haven't been done that's causing a lot of heartburn and questions for the entire community, for the people that are looking at developing this and the people who live on the part that's already been developed. I think the people who live in the part that is developed don't understand that the 6 acres in front of them, how that's going to be used has changed substantially. Santa Clara dropped the ball in not developing that for low-cost housing when they should have. The money they had went back to the state because they didn't do anything with that money in a timely manner, and they lost the money. So now that 6 acres has to be developed with other properties that bring in money. So the density they were promised has changed, and they will have substantially more neighbors than they ever planned for or were ever promised. So they need to know that. That's a reality. They probably aren't happy with it, but Santa Clara dropped the ball. That's a reality for them. The other thing is the retail. I'm surprised there's retail on that site now too. Perhaps we are putting too much in one basket of 6 acres. I also don't understand why we're not looking at the entire site in its totality. Why are we not laying out the whole site and bringing all the stakeholders together at one time and really master planning the site? It's like we're kind of putting different pieces of the candy in front of kids, but we're not showing them what's available. In other words, here's your candy, but you're going to have a hell of a toothache at the end of it if you eat all this candy at one time. You're not showing them the whole picture. So why aren't we showing them all the pictures and let everybody decide how much candy do you want and how many cavities do you want? Why isn't everybody coming together and saying, these are your trade-offs, what can you have? Do you want 2 acres of this? And if you do that, it's going to cost you this. And if you do this, this is what you're going to cost you that. I don't know why we're not putting all the pieces together at one time so that everybody can decide what trade-offs we want. Trying to grow something in the dark is a dumb thing to do.
Thank you, Deborah.
Putting things
Thank
out
you.
with no parking is a dumb thing to do. We haven't addressed safety. We
Deborah.
haven't addressed access.
We're not
So-
talking about that, but thank you very much. We
Well,
have
you
to move
are.
on.
With the
Thank
public
you.
spaces, you have
Deborah,
to decide
please, we
where
have
it
to move on.
goes.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you all for coming this evening. Unfortunately, many of you did not get involved with our visioning session for the property, and I'm sorry to hear that because there's been a lot of good ideas. And I just want to say a lot of the good ideas this evening can be incorporated into this project. I think a lot of things were issues that we talked about, and we haven't determined the size of the agricultural part. We haven't determined any of that yet. This is just an idea of what happened after the visioning session. So it's not too late, and there has been no decisions made on an actual project for the open spaces of the property. But I think what's really important is that this land is very important, and people want to be involved, and the people want to make this a public space. However it ends up, they want it to be a public and inviting space with aquaponics, agriculture, innovation, educational, multi-generational, multifaceted, sustainable. I mean, all those things that were thrown out this evening are all the things we want to do on that property. So keep the faith. It's going to happen, and this is a work in progress. So I want to thank Project for Public Spaces. I want to thank CORE for working with us through this whole process, and our Community Development Department, Andrew, and your whole team, and our city manager, if you'd like to tell us our next steps on this, because this is just a study session.
Mayor, just to be very clear, I'll actually request Andrew Crabtree to walk us through the steps.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. So, this was the point tonight was to get a lot of information out and to hear it all in the session. And so with taking that, we'll take some time to digest and work through it all. But the intention is that CORE would look, we would have those discussions with CORE, they would take that information and take it back into their process and come up with a response to that, to all this. And that'll take a couple of months for them. So really it's, towards the end of summer that we're looking to having our sort of next community outreach engagement activities once we have had an opportunity to come up with a response for everything we've heard tonight.
Okay. Well, with that, then we're going to adjourn for about 10 minutes before the council meeting starts. Thank you all for coming. Oh, are we going to have any, we won't have time. We'll have to trail. Yes.